Well, folks, I apologize for the delay. Many of you have been looking forward to this, and I was too, but apparently Nurgle had other ideas and blessed me again right at the end of December to be sick. So that was twice in the month of December after having not been sick at all for 2 years. At least I say not sick at all, not sick for any substantial period of time, maybe allergies, something that here or the other. Anyway, this is not a health report on me. This is a health report on our friends, the Warriors of Chaos. That's right. In fact, today's State of the Faction, which is the new series that I am working on, we are going to cover the Warriors of Chaos, who were added as a pre-order DLC to Total War Warhammer. So back in October of 2015, we got this trailer here that told us that if we pre-ordered Total War Warhammer, that you would get the Warriors of Chaos as a DLC faction. And boy, did that ignite a firestorm of angry people. And there was probably a few reasons for this, one of which would have been the fairly recent memory of the launch of Total War Rome 2. Like, a lot of people were probably not feeling great about pre-ordering stuff. So again, I feel pretty good about pre-ordering stuff from CA right now, but it took a while to get me back there. And at this point, I think a lot of us were thinking, no, I don't think so. I don't really want to pre-order anything. So that was probably one factor that played into this. And secondly, a lot of people just felt like, hey, how can you take Chaos and put them in that position? They're like this underlying element of the entire story that this whole game would be based on, right? Chaos brings the end times. This whole game is kind of based around the end times. How can you make Chaos a DLC faction? Anyway, there was a lot of people very upset about it. Personally, I wasn't terribly upset about it. I didn't think it was the best or brightest move by CA, but I didn't think it was also like the worst thing ever. I mean, here I am in 2022 looking at you, Halo Infinite store. So no, we're not at the level of like the Halo Infinite store here with this move, but it wasn't brilliant. Most people disliked it, and it caused a lot of controversy. Eventually, it led to CA making basically the pre-order faction be available even after the release of the game. That way you could wait for reviews, and you could buy it afterwards once you'd seen people playing it, and so that was one of their ways to answer it. But anyway, that was the controversy. How has the faction fared? Do they have a fun campaign? Do they have a good roster? Was all the controversy worth it? And are they ready for Game 3? So here we go for today's State of the Faction, the Warriors of Chaos. All right, moving away from the controversy of the launch and making Chaos a technically DLC faction, let's take a look at their campaign start and mechanics. How do they stack up? Are the Warriors of Chaos in a good shape headed into Game 3? Now, quickly, before we move any further on this, there's going to be a big difference between the Chaos Gods specific factions. So for instance, in the upcoming title in Game 3, you're going to have a faction based on Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, and Khorne. You're going to have a faction on all 4 Chaos Gods. This is the Warriors of Chaos faction, which I've heard called Chaos Undivided. I'm not a lore master of sorts, but essentially Archaon's leading a combined force of them. This is a different faction, and we're talking specifically about them, right? Now, I have no doubt that the 4 Chaos Gods sub-factions are going to be in good shape because they are a Game 3 race, and they will probably be fun to play. However, the Warriors of Chaos, spoiler alert, they kind of suck. And there's not a whole lot of way around it. And they've been this way for a very long time. And CA has made some changes that have helped them. We'll take a look at their campaign starts, their mechanics, and their lords, and then their roster, and how all this stacks up. So let's get this discussion started, because it's not exactly going to be a positive one, at least not from my angle. Now, if you think that I'm wrong, again, feel free to share it, and I'm happy to read through that. Sometimes I get some really good comments from folks that disagree with me, and I enjoy it because I like hearing different points of view. So, their campaign starts, well, they're all the same, and yeah, that sucks. So you got Archaon, Kolek, and Sigvald. You can't play as Sartorial. So even though there are 4 legendary lords that you can play in, say, like a custom battle or a multiplayer battle, Sartorial is not controllable in a campaign. All 3 of these legendary lords start in the exact same location, kind of to the northeast of the map. And that is kind of stupid and unforgivable at this point. I mean, almost every other race has had something done about this, but for some reason, Chaos has not. Now, in terms of these different lords and their mechanics, all of these factions play as a nomadic. They can't settle anywhere. So again, I think the only building you do is pretty much your Horde encampment, and we'll take a look at that here in a moment. But as far as like really interesting faction mechanics that we see up at this level, like the race attributes or Warriors of Chaos, really nothing to write home about. There's just nothing interesting here. So for me, it falls flat. The campaign starts are lame, and the faction effects and other stuff are also lame. Other than you get a lot of extra money from raising settlements, which is important because you're really not getting money any other way as Chaos because they don't have any settlements. So I guess there's that. Anyway, let's go check out their starts in the Eye of the Vortex. That's right, they don't have any. So, was Chaos ever added into the story of the Vortex? No, which is funny because they were involved most of the time. Sometimes you'd end up with Skaven armies and other stuff, but yeah. So, again, CA knocking out of the park on that one. All right, let's jump into the campaign map and take a look at those awesome mechanics. So here on the campaign map, we'll get a look at, again, this is where every single lord starts in the same spot. You don't even start within march of a settlement, like, so you kind of have to just blow your first turn. So I don't know, like, there's no army to fight, there's no settlement to attack. It's a very odd start position, not particularly interesting either. I think the only thing about it that kind of makes sense to me is that you're bringing the hordes out of the north, but you don't even really start with a big horde. You start with a pretty good army here that's got multiple Chaos Warriors and then one Chosen. So, I mean, it is pretty potent for this early in the game. But, I mean, nothing about this is terribly exciting. It's not a giant horde. There's not a big settlement. There's not a big battle to be fought to get things started and kick things off. I mean, yeah, it's very strange. So as far as the income goes for Chaos, it's not in, gold or whatever. It's favor, essentially, favor from the Dark Gods. You have a army panel and then a horde panel building. So all of your building takes place here. It is a very limited settlement, and that's all you build. So, if you enjoy settlement building, there's not going to be a whole lot of that. In a Chaos campaign, it's going to be very limited. So yeah, not very interesting in that regard. And if we take a look at oh wait, there isn't anything else. Look at this up here. Normally there's like all these other little bars for, special currencies or special. None of that's there. There is no special currency. There's nothing driving you in this Chaos campaign like a WA or some kind of laboratory or nope, none of that. None of that here, folks. So move along. And then as far as the tech tree goes, very thin and very lame. So I have played one Chaos campaign. It was with Archaon, and it was very popular, but it was not popular so much because of the mechanics. It was popular because we used a bunch of mods to fix a whole bunch of this crap. And it was also popular because it was the first time I had ever done like a cinematic campaign where I kind of made it a little more narrative and other stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun with it regardless. But the current state of campaign for Warriors of Chaos is really bad. Like, it's terrible. Probably the worst in the game. Now, some people might be screaming, Norska. Don't get me wrong. We're headed to Norska, but I still think Warriors of Chaos are bottom tier here. So this is a complete miss. These guys are not ready for Game 3. They're not even up to code for Game 2. So that's the current state of their campaign. Well, it did not look good on the campaign selection screen or the campaign map for Chaos. There was actually very little to discuss because there's very little there. And it's not particularly interesting. So let's take a look at the Chaos roster. Maybe they redeem themselves there. So let's jump in as per usual. We're going to scoot past Lords and Heroes to begin with and jump into the standard roster. Chaos is definitely a faction that is strongest with its infantry. and they are very, very powerful. In terms of just pound for pound best infantry in the game, they have it, and it's going to be the Chosen. They are very expensive, but, you know, when you do play that extremely lame campaign, you will get the benefit of having extremely good elite infantry. Like I said, the best in the game. And we'll talk a little bit about how they stack up in multiplayer and campaign more specifically later, but stats-wise, Chosen are amazing. You got the Chosen with great weapons, which can basically mulch anything else in the game, infantry-wise. Chosen with halberds, which are extremely good against large and armored targets. And then you have the standard Chosen with the sword and shield, or sorry, axe and shield, I believe. These characters are going to be extremely good against low-tier or unarmored infantry, where AP is not needed. And then as we move down the stack, you're going to have Chaos Warriors, which have the same 3 flavors: halberd, great weapon, and sword and axe. They're going to serve the same purpose, but at a slightly lower tier. Now, for their cost, Chaos Warriors are some darn good infantry. So this is one of the benefits of the roster for Chaos is at this price level, these are some pretty solid infantry picks for the Chaos Warriors. The one thing I think that is a big hurt usually for Chaos is that you'll notice that none of these infantry units, both the Chosen and, you know, again, the keyword there being Chosen, and then the standard Chaos Warriors, none of them are immune to psychology, and their leadership isn't bad. Like, it's pretty solid for the Chosen and not terrible for the Warriors of Chaos, but keep that in mind for a discussion later. Now, Forsaken, interesting, fast-moving, high-damage dealing unit here that also does better damage on the charge. These are great units for running a flank. They will absolutely mulch through skirmishers. They will mulch through cheap infantry. They themselves have 85 armor, which makes them difficult to counter for other low-armor units, unless they are specifically AP, which most of them are not. So again, it makes Forsaken very deadly to those units. Aspiring Champions are a support unit. They are small in the number of entities, but they do have magic attacks, which can be handy in the right situation. So these are very good against factions like Vampire Counts or others who might be fielding ethereal units or units with high physical resistance. Not to mention, Aspiring Champions do provide an Encourage aura, which makes them actually really valuable in coupling with Warriors of Chaos and the Chosen, because of what I mentioned earlier, with them not really having a whole lot of, they don't have the immune to psychology. So Aspiring Champions can be a great way to get units to fight longer, and not just the Chaos Warriors, but also the Chaos Marauders at the very bottom of the stack, couple nicely with Aspiring Champions. Now, Marauders are pretty cost-effective for their range. The Marauders with great weapons do AP damage for very cheap, but the Marauders lack the armor that their big brother Chaos units have, but they also provide you a low-cost option. So as far as infantry goes, there's a pretty nice selection here for Chaos, and they pretty much have all the facets of the infantry covered, because this is probably the biggest strength of their roster. We move on to Cavalry and Chariots here. They do have Chaos Chariots, which are a good anti-infantry tool, Gore Beast Chariots, which up that and add armor piercing and a lot more armor, so making them more survivable and they do more damage. Then we start off with Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights are an excellent unit of cavalry. They have good melee defense, they have a good shield, really high armor, decent charge bonus, and pretty solid attack stats. So, I mean, overall, it's a very capable melee cavalry. They're just very expensive. And then when we move on to the Lance variant, it's the same story, folks. These guys hit even harder on the charge, massive charge, very powerful cavalry. And they, again, well, I say again, this time they have much lower defense stats because they're not meant for like a prolonged melee. They're meant to charge and get out. Very powerful cavalry, very strong, very heavily armored. They can do tons of damage to infantry or anything that just doesn't get a good counter charge on them. Again, very expensive is going to be the challenge with them. I say very expensive. I mean, we're in the same range as, say, like a Demigryph Knight with halberds. And the Knights with lances run basically the same cost, and the same with the Knights here. They're very, very close. But a lot of people tend to find a little more value in those specialty units than they do these Knight units. However, though, don't write off the Chaos Knights. They are certainly good units in the right situation, both in multiplayer and in campaign. And they provide you with a very heavy, hard-hitting cavalry in both of those situations as well. Now, I think a lot of people's favorite cavalry from Chaos is actually the light cavalry, which there's not a ton of options here, but it's still very good. Marauder horsemen are quite cheap at 500. They're not amazing in melee, but they have a lot of javelins, and these javelins, although they're not specifically anti-large or AP, they do decent missile damage, and given some time and annoyance, and the fact that these guys can fire in a 360-degree arc while moving, Marauder horsemen are very effective, and they are a very important unit for Chaos, especially in multiplayer, because these units can be used to harass like crazy against your enemy, and they are difficult for some factions to deal with. In fact, I would say that Chaos kind of thrives in its light, speedy stuff, and it's partly because of the Hounds, which we'll discuss in a minute as well. Now, there is a throwing axe variant, and the throwing axe variant has even less range, and their throw is kind of awkward, but it is an AP throw. Not as many people are going to be using these in multiplayer, but they can sometimes have a use in campaign when you specifically need something armor piercing. And then there's the big brother variant of both of these, which is the Marauder Horse Masters, which are going to pack more armor. They're going to be a little better in melee. They're going to have stronger javelins and just overall be a better unit. And these ones also get used in both campaign and in multiplayer, as when you need something slightly heavier than those standard ones, this is what people will bring. So the light cavalry and the missile cavalry here is actually pretty great for Chaos as well. I'd say that this is another of their strengths, especially when you combine it with the fact that you can have Chaos Warhounds and Warhounds with Poison, which are both very light, very fast-moving units. And the Hounds with Poison, remember, if they get a hold of anything, they're going to slow it down. And it's going to make a mess for it that way. So the Hounds with Poison can combine nicely with the cavalry, or it can combine nicely with the missile cavalry. So in terms of speed and maneuverability, Chaos has always been pretty darn decent. This is what's always made them dangerous against the Empire, is the fact that the Empire relies on all these ranged specialist units, and Chaos can get in and disrupt them with their speed and maneuverability. Next up in the Monster and Beast, we have the Feral Manticore. I love the Feral Manticore. I think at 800, this unit is a bargain. It is fast. It does really high damage. It's not specifically AP, but it does a lot of damage. The real downside of the Manticore is that it can go berserk. You can lose control of it whenever it takes some damage. But I find that these units, for their price, can provide you a lot of hitting power. Just be careful with them. They're not terribly survivable once they start undergoing some withering missile fire or get stuck in some spears or something else like that. But very good units. Then you have Chaos Trolls. Not a highly used unit here, but in campaign they can provide you some AP. Multiplayer, you're probably not going to see a ton of Chaos Trolls. This is a monstrous infantry unit basically used for support. Their leadership is really poor, and their armor is not so great either. Chaos Spawn, you will see occasionally when people need to add something unbreakable into their line. This is a good way to cause extra damage. I like running Chaos Spawn behind an armored infantry line. And when you combine the two, the armored infantry line kind of provides a little bit of protection for the spawn, and then you can see the weapon strength in the spawn is very high. These are a damage-dealing unit, but if they go in alone, since they lack the armor, they'll typically get chopped up and not cause a ton of damage. Now we got Armored Trolls, which I think these guys are a lot more effective for Chaos. I don't see them used a ton in multiplayer, but they are fun to use in campaign. Their armor makes them a lot harder to kill and kind of helps offset their still poor leadership. But, fun units nonetheless. Chaos Giant, same as a regular Giant that we've seen with, say, like the other factions that can field one. Now, that said, the Giant is going to be great at beating up Lords, infantry blobs, single entity monsters. It does a lot of damage, and it's armor-piercing damage. The real downside is the lack of armor when it comes to the Giant. Then we're going to go to Dragon Ogres. Dragon Ogres are a very nice AP anti-large tool. It's a monstrous cavalry, and they are quite good at what they do. They're a little more expensive than, say, a Demigryph Knight with Halberd, but these are tough units, and they're good units at what they do. So for Chaos to have a tool at bringing down large, Dragon Ogres are an excellent option. And then you have the Big Daddy, or not the biggest daddy, but the older cousins, I guess, the Dragon Ogres. This is the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, which is a single entity version of the Dragon Ogres. It's even larger and even stronger against armored and large targets. Very tanky units. They do have innate missile resistance, and they're going to need it because they're very, very large targets. But they are quite good. They cause fear, they cause terror. Very nice single entity monster for Chaos. Then it comes to artillery. The Hell Cannon is the only range artillery piece that you're going to see for Chaos, and outside of the Missile Cavalry, it's the only range unit you're going to see. And it is a good artillery piece. It's been nerfed, but it's still pretty powerful. It can be manually targeted too, and kind of has like a homing missile that it can fire, and it can be targeted into the most expensive infantry. In campaign, these units can be very deadly for the player, and in multiplayer, if used properly, the same can be said, though it's a little harder to pull it off in multiplayer, but it does give Chaos some long range. And like I said, in campaign, you can really abuse what you can do with the Hell Cannons, with the manual targeting and stuff. So interesting, it's an interesting cannon. It's pretty good, and it gives Chaos the ability to stand off from range. All right, well, that's the roster. kind of short, wasn't it? Relatively easy to get through that discussion. Yes, we still have to talk about heroes and lords, but yeah, well, we'll finish that discussion here in a minute. So heroes, the Exalted Hero. Pretty good melee option for Chaos. They can go in unmounted if you get rid of these special abilities. They're actually relatively inexpensive. If they go in on foot to, say, support Marauders or Chaos Warriors, they have mount options as well. You can put them on a Chaos Steed or a Barded Chaos Steed, or you can even put them on a Manticore and make them go flying. A lot of uses for the Exalted Hero. Overall, not a bad ad for the hero, and definitely something that you'll see in both campaign and multiplayer, and used to pretty good effect. So I think that this is a decent addition here. And then in terms of the other heroes, they're all sorcerers, and Chaos gets access to Shadow, Death, Fire, and Metal, all of which are very useful lures of magic, and give Chaos some capability for sure in multiplayer. And then enough options for fun in campaign. Shadows is going to be good, mostly because of Pit of Shades and Penumbral Pendulum, but there's some nice debuffs in here too with Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. And then you've also got the Withering, an enfeebling foe. So Shadows is quite good. Death is quite good. It's good at helping to take down single entities. Purple Sun is great at busting blobs. Soul Blight and Doom and Darkness can be good at helping to get rid of an enemy army faster. They're excellent debuffs. Fire is a very popular pick for Chaos. The Burning Head is an excellent spell. It does line damage, so damage along a line. You've also got Piercing Bolts, which can be quite good against blobs and single entities. Fireball, which is good at shooting out at low armored single entities. So lots of options with fire. And then metal is very popular for two reasons. One is Final Transmutation, which is very good at doing damage to single entity targets. And then you've also got the Plague of Rust, which is right here. And the Overcast version of it takes away 60 armor. And Plague of Rust is a very popular pick whenever you want to cut through an armored target, but you don't specifically have an anti-armor unit to do it. So, for instance, remember those Marauder Horsemen with Javelins? You knock the armor off something, these guys are suddenly very dangerous to whatever target they're shooting off of. So, good hero selection for Chaos. Not a ton of variety here, right? It's melee or sorcerer, which, you know, that option's pretty much available to all the other factions too. It is what it is. The nice thing about the Chaos Sorcerers is they all have a Manticore mount, which can kind of turn them into a hybrid type unit. But anyway, that's the heroes. All right, let's move on to lords, and we're going to start off with just the generic stuff. You have a generic Chaos Lord, and this generic Chaos Lord can be mounted on anything from a Chaos Steed up to a Manticore or even a Chaos Dragon. On the Dragon, it gets very good AP damage, flaming attacks, you get breath attacks. Basically a melee hero that you can bring to battle that gives you the ability to have anything from running around on foot, riding on a horse, to flying on a Manticore or a Dragon. It's a nice pick for a generic Lord and nice to have in the roster. And then you have the big brother versions of the Chaos Sorcerers down here. We're going to have Death, Fire, Metal, and Shadows once again. So again, these are just the big brother versions. They can be mounted on the same plethora of mounts that the Chaos Lord could. So that's that, right? So you have those options both at Hero and at Lord. The only difference being is that the Exalted Hero, for instance, does not have a dragon mount in his hero state, and nor do the Chaos Sorcerers, but they do have that option if you decide to bring them as the Lord in your army. Okay, now let's talk about Legendary Lords. Prince Sigvald the Magnificent. He has undergone some changes throughout his time, and right now, in the current state he's in, he is one of the better picks for the Warriors of Chaos. He has perfect vigor, which means he never gets tired. He encourages troops nearby. He's immune to psychology. He used to be unbreakable. He's not anymore, from what I can tell. I don't believe he's unbreakable. If we take a look at his other stats here, he has 15% missile resistance and expert charge defense, which means if he's standing still, he's going to shrug off the extra charge bonus from whatever charges him. He's got 60 melee defense and 70 attack, which means that he is going to be landing hits. And whenever you have a melee attack that high, you're going to be landing hits. And at 60 melee defense, it actually makes him fairly difficult to hit back on. He also has a silver shield, which is contributing to that melee defense. And his weapon strength is 520. It doesn't say it's specifically armor piercing, but 180 of it is. So you don't get the AP thing popping up here because it's not a majority armor piercing, but 180 AP with another base 340. And remember that just because a unit has armor, doesn't mean that you won't apply some of the non-armor piercing damage, right? It's just that armor piercing damage goes straight through the armor, regardless. The other damage can still apply to a degree. The armor will just lessen it. So don't underestimate the damage that Sigvald could do. He's slow, like he can't run around real fast because he has no mounts. But this guy is strong, and especially when you couple it with something like heroic killing blow here, and increase, and a 50% increase to armor piercing weapon damage. It was 180. 50% of that is another 90. So you're up at 270 AP. That's a lot of damage for 25 seconds coming out of Sigvald. And then on top of that, he's got the standard die effect here, which adds 24 melee defense for a short period of time, which makes him even harder to hit. I mean, at 84 melee defense, by the time you turn this on, he's going to be near impossible to hit. And then, of course, he has the auric armor, and the auric armor makes him heal, which makes him that much more difficult to kill. And with 15% physical resistance plus a silver shield, he's not particularly easy to hit with missiles either. And he's not a particularly large target. So Sigvald is a solid choice, and he is a very capable lord in the current state of the game. And he has kind of gone back and forth from being a meme to decent, and I'd say he's in pretty decent shape at the moment. I like where Sigvald's at. He's probably one of the ultimate duelist in the games, and a duelist meaning a character who is great at just going head to head with another character. And then we have Archaon. Archaon has gone everything from being called the Never Chosen to being a meme, and now he is very potent. So CA updated him over time. He used to be a very unpopular pick, and now he's probably the most popular pick for Chaos. Him or Sigvald won. It's a tight fight between them, but I would say Archaon is probably a bit more popular. He comes with heavy armor, a solid shield. He does magical attacks at a very high rate at 68. He has a melee defense equal to Sigvald at 60, which means he is difficult to hit. And he does do dedicated AP damage at 330, and then another 140 that goes in on base damage. So he hits hard. Like, he hits very hard. And then on top of that for Archaon, he's got a special ability over here in the Slayer of Kings, which is going to give him a ton of extra damage for about 25 seconds. The Slayer of Kings is well known in multiplayer, and I'm sure it's well used in campaign. If you're looking to go delete an enemy lord, well, leave your lord parked there in front of Archaon with the Slayer of Kings, and it lives up to its name. Like, he is going to slay you. He causes massive damage whenever he gets that stuff going. So do not for a second underestimate what Archaon can do. with that Slayer of Kings kicked on. And then you couple that, like, that he is an excellent melee character. And you couple that with the fact that he's a secondary fire caster at that. Like, now he's not particularly good at summoning up winds of magic like a Balthasar or a Manfred. But you add the fact that he is a beast in melee and that he can cast fire. This dude's good. Like, he is good. And the Lore of Fire is a good magic. It is extremely good at mopping up low armor infantry lines, shooting fireballs at low armor heroes or high value targets. And then Piercing Bolts of Burning is actually surprisingly good against a single entity if you can hold it still and hit it with it. So lots of good magic. Archaon is a solid pick. He's my favorite lord with the Warriors of Chaos right now. Kolek Suneater probably used to be the most popular lord pick, and he's less popular now, not because he got worse. I don't think he really did. I think just Archaon and Sigvald got a lot better. And the problem with Chaos is they don't have any healing. So a big target like Kolek, although he does really hit hard, he smashes. I mean, if you look at his weapon damage down there, he is very powerful, very capable against other large targets, and he's very quick too, at 78 speed. He gets around the battlefield, he's got high mass, he can plow through infantry, stuff like that. He's got a cool special ability with his lightning, that he can use to bust up stuff. So Kolek's a great lord. I just think that he's less popular now because Archaon and Sigvald have improved, but he still offers Chaos something different, something fast-moving with anti-large capability, and is fun in that regard. As far as special items, he does have Star Crusher, which again, massively increases the amount of damage he does. So very similar story for all these lords having some kind of ability that temporarily increases their damage by a lot. Now for Kolek, though, this one lasts for 43 seconds. It's a long time, so he's going to do a lot of extra damage. Finally, we have Sartorial, the Everwatcher, who is not playable in the campaign, but is playable in customs and in multiplayer. He is also a fairly popular pick. He used to be more popular. Now that Archaon and Sigvald are better, he's a little less popular, but he serves a specific role. He's kind of like the Chaos version of Volkmar the Grim, in the sense that he can plow through infantry lines, he can disrupt formations. He has very high missile resistance at 50%, and he's got 25% magic resistance. Makes him a bit of a nightmare to bring down quickly with missiles, which means you typically end up in him with melee, but he's difficult to get into melee because he's a slippery chicken. He's always slipping around the battlefield and getting away from you with his mass and animations. He doesn't fly, but he kind of hovers just off the ground. And so this guy has been avoiding the 11 herbs and spices for a long time in terms of getting away from being chicken fried. And he has been kind of a nightmare for dwarves and other factions that have a hard time putting enough mass into something to stop him. And Sartorial comes with the Lore of Metal. And he's not particularly skilled at getting a ton of extra winds of magic or anything, but Final Transmutation, Plague of Rust, a little bit of Searing Doom in there, very useful spells. And so Sartorial has been a popular pick, and is still a viable pick, both for multiplayer, but obviously not for campaign. But anyway, that's the Chaos roster. It's thin, folks. And remember that this is the Chaos roster after making Sartorial playable and after adding Regiments of Renown for Chaos. Remember, we didn't even have that. So this roster is thin. It has barely been touched. Really, it hasn't been touched unless you look at the addition of the Regiments of Renown. It's bad. It needs help. Are these guys viable in multiplayer? Sure. Yeah, people use them in multiplayer. I use them in multiplayer. They're not terrible. The Regiments of Renown actually made a pretty big difference for them in multiplayer. Not all the difference, but it made some. The improvements to Archaon and Sigvald were really important for multiplayer. So yeah, do they play in multiplayer? They do. They're okay. They're not going to blow your mind, but they're pretty good in certain matchups, and they're still very dangerous to certain factions. Like, for instance, I would probably still be willing to pick Chaos to counter someone like the Empire. I still think that they're decent at roles like that in multiplayer. Now, that said, in campaign, are they good? Well, yes. They're good because their infantry is just so good that if you spend the time in campaign upgrading your lord and then upgrading the infantries and stuff like that, Sure, you're going to truck people in campaign with their infantry. Well, Air, that means they're fine, right? You're saying they're fine. Nah, they're not. They're boring. The roster's too thin. They just need more. There's something lacking here, and I mean, especially going into Game 3, we look at the love that CA is giving to Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, Khorne. They're all getting all these specific units, fun stuff, soul grinders, demons, all that stuff, and you see none of that here. And it's just not very interesting. So, in my opinion, Chaos needs some serious help. I do not think the Warriors of Chaos are ready for Game 3. I think they're going to be totally out of place in Game 3. CA may have a plan for it. I don't know. We haven't heard anything yet. I haven't been paying particularly close attention, so it's possible they've said something and I'm just unaware of it at the moment. But Chaos is not great. They need help. And I would say that they are not ready. And as far as looking at the Game 1 factions so far, they're definitely the worst in terms of the position they're in. And I would like to see a lot more out of them. Anyway, share your thoughts with me down in the comments. You tell me what you think would help the Warriors of Chaos, or am I wrong? Are they fine? Let me know. Anyway, HeirofCarthage, signing out for now. Hope y'all enjoyed it. I'll be back with more soon.